Chapter 12. A loud clatter of gunk music floated through the Heart of Gold cabin as Zaphod searched the sub-ether radio wave bands for news of himself. The machine was rather difficult to operate. For years, radios had been operated by means of pressing buttons and turning dials. Then, as the technology became more sophisticated, the controls were made touch-sensitive. You merely had to brush the panel with your fingers. Now all you had to do was wave your hand in the general direction of the components and hope. It saved a lot of muscular expenditure, of course, but it meant that you had to sit infuriatingly still if you wanted to keep listening to the same program. Zaphod waved a hand and the channel switched again. More gunk music, but this time it was background to a news announcement. The news was always heavily edited to fit the rhythms of the music. And news reports brought to you here on the sub-ether wave band, broadcasting around the galaxy, around the clock, squawked a voice. We'll be saying a big hello to all intelligent life forms everywhere. And to everyone else out there, the secret is to bang the rocks together, guys. And of course, the big news story tonight is the sensational theft of the new improbability drive prototype ship by none other than Galactic President Zaphod Beeblebrox. And the question everyone's asking is, has the big Z finally flipped? Beeblebrox, the man who invented the pan-galactic Gargle Blaster, ex-confidence trickster, was described by eccentric Golumbits as the best bang since the big one, and recently voted as the worst-dressed sentient being in the known universe for the 7th time. Has he got an answer this time? He asked his private brain care specialist, Gag Halfront. The music swirled and dived for a moment. Another voice broke in, presumably Halfront. He said, "Well, Zaphod's just this guy, you know," but got no further because an electric pencil flew across the cabin and through the radio's on-off sensitive airspace. Zaphod turned and glared at Trillian. She had thrown the pencil. "Hey," he said, "what did you do that for?" Trillian was tapping her fingers on a screen full of figures. "I just thought of something," she said. "Yeah? Worth interrupting a news bulletin about me for?" "You hear enough about yourself as it is." "I'm very insecure. We know that." "Can you drop your ego for a moment? This is important. If there's anything more important than my ego around, I want it caught and shot now." Zaphod glared at her again, then laughed. "Listen," she said, "we picked up those couple of guys." "What couple of guys?" "The couple of guys we picked up." "Oh yeah," said Zaphod, "those couple of guys. We picked them up in sector ZZ9, plural Z alpha." "Yeah," said Zaphod and blinked. Trillian said quietly, "Does that mean anything to you?" Said Zaphod. ZZ9, plural Z alpha. ZZ9, plural Z alpha. "Well," said Trillian. What did the Z mean?" said Zaphod. "Which one?" "Anyone." One of the major difficulties Trillian experienced in her relationship with Zaphod was learning to distinguish between him pretending to be stupid just to get people off their guard, pretending to be stupid because he couldn't be bothered to think and wanted someone else to do it for him, pretending to be outrageously stupid to hide the fact that he actually didn't understand what was going on, and really being genuinely stupid. He was renowned for being amazingly clever, and quite clearly was so, but not all the time, which obviously worried him, hence the act. He preferred people to be puzzled rather than contemptuous. This, above all, appeared to Trillian to be genuinely stupid, but she could no longer be bothered to argue about it. She sighed and punched up a star map on the visa screen so she could make it simple for him, whatever his reasons for him wanting it to be that way. "There," she pointed, "right there." "Hey, yeah," said Zaphod. "Well?" she said. "Well, what?" Parts of the inside of her head screamed at other parts of the inside of her head. She said, very calmly, "It's the same sector you originally picked me up in." He looked at her and then looked back at the screen. "Hey, yeah," he said. "Now that is wild. We should have zapped straight into the middle of the Horsehead Nebula. How did we come to be there? I mean, that's nowhere." She ignored this. "Improbability drive," she said patiently. "You explained it to me yourself. We pass through every point in the universe. You know that. Yeah, but that's one wild coincidence, isn't it? Yes. Picking someone up at that point, out of the whole universe to choose from, that's just too. I want to work this out. Computer. The Sirius Cybernetics shipboard computer, which controlled and permeated every particle of the ship, switched into communication mode. Hi there, it said brightly and simultaneously spewed out a tiny ribbon of ticker tape, just for the record. The ticker tape said, "Hi there." Oh God, said Zaphod. He hadn't worked with this computer for long, but had already learned to loathe it. The computer continued, brash and cheery, as if it were selling detergent. "I want you to know that whatever your problem, I am here to help you solve it." Yeah, said Zaphod. "Look, I think I'll just use a piece of paper." "Sure thing," said the computer, spilling out its message into a waste bin at the same time. "I understand. If you ever want—" "Shut up," said Zaphod, and snatching up a pencil, sat down next to Trillian at the console. Okay, said the computer in a hurt tone of voice, and closed down its speech channel again. Zaphod and Trillian pored over the figures that the improbability flight path scanner flashed silently up in front of them. "Can we work out," said Zaphod, "from their point of view, what the improbability of their rescue was?" "Yes, that's a constant," said Trillian. 2 to the power of 276,709 to 1 against. That's high. They're two lucky guys. Yes. But relative to what we were doing when the ship picked them up, Trillian punched up the figures. They showed the 2 to the power of infinity minus 1 to 1 against, an irrational number that only has conventional meaning in improbability physics. "It's pretty low," continued Zaphod with a slight whistle. "Yes," agreed Trillian, and looked at him quizzically. "That's one big whack of improbability to be accounted for. Something pretty improbable has got to show up on the balance sheet if this is all going to add up to a pretty sum." Zaphod scribbled a few sums, crossed them out, and threw the pencil away. "That's dues. I can't work it out." "Well?" Zaphod knocked his two heads together in irritation and gritted his teeth. "Okay. Computer." The voice circuit sprang to life again. "Why, hello there," they said. Ticker tape, ticker tape. "All I want to do is make your day nicer and nicer and nicer." "Yeah, well, shut up and work something out for me." "Sure thing," chattered the computer. "You want a probability forecast based on improbability data." "Yeah." "Okay," the computer continued. "Here's an interesting little notion. Do you realize that most people's lives are governed by telephone numbers?" A pained look crawled across one of Zaphod's faces and onto the other one. "Have you flipped?" he said. "No, but you will when I tell you that—" Trillian gasped. She scrabbled at the buttons on the improbability flight path screen. "Telephone number?" she said. "Did that thing say telephone number?" Numbers flashed up on the screen. The computer had paused politely, but now it continued. "What I was about to say was that—" "Don't bother, please," said Trillian. "Look, what is this?" said Zaphod. "I don't know," said Trillian, "but those aliens, they're on their way up to the bridge with that wretched robot. Can we pick them up on any monitor cameras?" Chapter 13. Marvin trudged down the corridor, still moaning. "And then, of course, I've got this terrible pain in all the diodes down my left-hand side." "No," said Arthur grimly as he walked along beside him. "Really?" "Oh, yes," said Marvin. "I mean, I've asked for them to be replaced, but no one ever listens." "I can imagine." Vague whistling and humming noises were coming from Ford. Well, he kept saying to himself. Zaphod Beeblebrox. Suddenly Marvin stopped and held up a hand. "You know what's happened now, of course." "No, what?" said Arthur, who didn't want to know. "We've arrived at another one of those doors." There was a sliding door let into the side of the corridor. Marvin eyed it suspiciously. "Well," said Ford impatiently, "do we go through?" "We go through?" mimicked Marvin. "Yes, this is the entrance to the bridge. I was told to take you to the bridge." Probably the highest demand that will be made on my intellectual capacities today. I shouldn't wonder. Slowly, with great loathing, he slept toward the door, like a hunter stalking his prey. Suddenly it slid open. "Thank you," it said, "for making a simple door very happy." Deep in Marvin's thorax, gears ground. Funny, he intoned funerarily. Just how when you think life can't possibly get any worse, it suddenly does. He heaved himself through the door and left Ford and Arthur staring at each other and shrugging their shoulders. From inside, they heard Marvin's voice again. "I suppose you'll want to see the aliens now," he said. "Do you want me to sit in a corner and rest, or just fall apart where I'm standing?" "Yeah, just show them in, would you, Marvin?" came another voice. Arthur looked at Ford and was astonished to see him laughing. "What's—" "Shh," said Ford. "Come on in." He stepped through into the bridge. Arthur followed him in nervously and was astonished to see a man lolling back in a chair, his feet on a control console, picking the teeth in his right-hand head with his left hand. The right hand seemed to be thoroughly preoccupied with this task. The left one was grinning a broad, relaxed, nonchalant grin. The number of things that Arthur couldn't believe he was seeing was fairly large. His jaw flopped about at a loose end for a while. The peculiar man waved a lazy wave at Ford and with an appalling affectation of nonchalance said, "Ford, hi, how are you? Glad you could drop in." Ford was not going to be outfooled. "Zaphod," he drawled. "Great to see you. You're looking well. The extra arm suits you. Nice ship you've stolen." Arthur goggled at him. "You mean you know this guy?" he said, waving a wild finger at Zaphod. "Know him!" exclaimed Ford. He paused and decided to do the introductions the other way around. "Oh, Zaphod, this is a friend of mine, Arthur Dent. I saved him when his planet blew up." "Oh, sure," said Zaphod. "Hi, Arthur. Glad you could make it." His right-hand head looked around casually, said hi, and went back to having its teeth picked. Ford carried on. "And Arthur, this is my semi-cousin, Zaphod. We've met," said Arthur sharply. When you're cruising down the road in the fast lane and you lazily sail past a few hard-driving cars and are feeling pretty pleased with yourself, and then accidentally change from fourth gear to first instead of third, thus making your engine leap out of your hood in a rather ugly mess, it tends to throw you off your stride in much the same way that this remark threw Ford Prefect off his. "What?" he said. "I said we've met." Zaphod gave an awkward start of surprise and jabbed a gum sharply. "Hey, have we? Hey." Ford rounded on Arthur with an angry flash in his eyes. Now he felt he was back on home ground. He suddenly began to resent having lumbered himself with this ignorant primitive who knew as much about the affairs of the galaxy as an Ilford-based gnat knew about life in Peking. "What do you mean you've met?" he demanded. "This is Zaphod Beeblebrox from Beetlejuice 5, you know, not bloody Martin Smith from Croydon." "I don't care," said Arthur coldly. "We've met, haven't we, Zaphod Beeblebrox? Or should I say, Phil?" "What?" shouted Ford. "You'll have to remind me," said Zaphod. "I have a terrible memory for species." "It was at a party," pursued Arthur. "Yeah, well, I doubt that," said Zaphod. "Cool it, will you, Arthur?" demanded Ford. Arthur would not be deterred. "A party 6 months ago. On Earth. England." Zaphod shook his head with a tight-lipped smile. "London," insisted Arthur. "Islington." "Oh," said Zaphod with a guilty start. "That party." This wasn't fair on Ford at all. He looked backward and forward between Arthur and Zaphod. "What?" he said to Zaphod. "You don't mean to say you've been on that miserable little planet as well, do you?" "No, of course not," said Zaphod breezily. "Well, I may have just dropped in briefly, on my way somewhere. But I was stuck there for 15 years. Well, I didn't know that, did I? But what were you doing there?" "Looking about. He gate crashed a party," said Arthur, trembling with anger. "A fancy dress party." "It would have to be, wouldn't it?" said Ford. "At this party," persisted Arthur, "was a girl. Look, it doesn't matter now. The whole place has gone up in smoke anyway. I wish you'd stop sulking about that bloody planet, said Ford. Who is the lady? Oh, just somebody. Well, all right, I wasn't doing very well with her. I've been trying all evening. Hell, she was something, though. Beautiful, charming, devastatingly intelligent. At last I got her to do myself for a bit, was plying her with a bit of talk. This friend of yours barges up and says, "Hey, doll, is this guy boring you? Why don't you talk to me instead? I'm from a different planet." I never saw her again. Zaphod? Exclaimed Ford. Yes, said Ford, glaring at him and trying not to feel foolish. He only had 2 arms and the 1 head, and he called himself Phil, but you must admit he did turn out to be from another planet, said Trillian, wandering into sight at the other end of the bridge. She gave Arthur a pleasant smile which settled on him like a ton of bricks, then turned her attention to the ship's controls again. There was silence for a few seconds, and then out of the scrambled mess of Arthur's brains crawled some words. "Tricia McMillan?" he said. "What are you doing here?" "Same as you," she said. "I hitched a lift. After all, with a degree in math and another in astrophysics, what else was there to do? It was either that or the dole queue again on Monday." "Infinity -1, chattered the computer. "Improbability sum now complete." Zaphod looked about him, at Ford, at Arthur, and then at Trillian. "Trillian," he said, "is this sort of thing going to happen every time we use the improbability drive?" "Very probably, I'm afraid." Chapter 14. The Heart of Gold fled on silently through the night of space, now on conventional photon drive. Its crew of 4 were ill at ease, knowing that they had been brought together not of their own volition or by simple coincidence, but by some curious perversion of physics, as if relationships between people were susceptible to the same laws that govern the relationships between atoms and molecules. As the ship's artificial night closed in, they were each grateful to retire to separate cabins and try to rationalize their thoughts. Trillian couldn't sleep. She sat on the couch and stared at a small cage which contained her last and only links with Earth. 2 white mice which she had insisted that Zaphod let her bring. She had never expected to see the planet again, but she was disturbed by her negative reaction to the news of the planet's destruction. It seemed remote and unreal, and she could find no thoughts to think about it. She watched the mice scurrying around the cage and running furiously in their little plastic treadwheels till they occupied her whole attention. Suddenly she shook herself and went back on the bridge to watch over the tiny flashing lights and figures that charted the ship's progress through the void. She wished she knew what she was trying not to think about. Zaphod couldn't sleep. He also wished he knew what it was that he wouldn't let himself think about. For as long as he could remember, he'd suffered from a nagging feeling of being not all there. Most of the time, he was able to put this thought aside and not worry about it, but somehow it had been reawakened by the sudden, inexplicable arrival of Ford Prefect and Arthur Dent. Somehow it seemed to conform to a pattern he couldn't see. Ford couldn't sleep. He was too excited about being back on the road again. 15 years of virtual imprisonment were over, just as he was finally beginning to give up hope. Knocking about with Zaphod for a bit promised to be a lot of fun, although there seemed to be something faintly odd about his semi-cousin that he couldn't put his finger on. The fact that he had become president of the galaxy was frankly astonishing, as was the manner of his leaving his post. Was there a reason behind it? There would be no point in asking Zaphod. He never appeared to have a reason for anything he did at all. He had turned unfathomability into an art form. He attacked everything in his life with a mixture of extraordinary genius and naive incompetence, and it was often difficult to tell which was which. Arthur slept. He was terribly tired. There was a tap at Zaphod's door. It slid open. "Zaphod?" "Yeah?" Trillian stood outlined in the oval of light. "I think we just found what you came to look for." "Hey, yeah?" Ford gave up the attempt to sleep. In the corner of his cabin was a small computer screen and keyboard. He sat at it for a while and tried to compose a new entry for the guide on the subject of Vogons. But he couldn't think of anything vitriolic enough, so he gave that up too. wrapped a robe around himself, and went for a walk to the bridge. As he entered, he was surprised to see two figures hunched excitedly over the instruments. See, the ship's about to move into orbit, Trillian was saying. There's a planet out there. It's at the exact coordinates you predicted. Zaphod heard a noise and looked up. Ford, he hissed. Hey, come look at this. Ford went and had a look at it. It was a series of figures flickering over a screen. You recognize those galactic coordinates? Said Zaphod. No. I'll give you a clue. Computer? Hi, gang, enthused the computer. This is getting real sociable, isn't it? Shut up, said Zaphod, and shook up the screens. Light on the bridge sank. Pinpoints of light played across the consoles and reflected in 4 pairs of eyes that stared up the external monitor screens. There was absolutely nothing on them. Recognize that? Whispered Zaphod. Ford frowned. No, he said. What do you see? Nothing. Recognize it? What are we talking about? We're in the Horsehead Nebula, one whole vast dark cloud. And I was meant to recognize that from a blank screen? Inside a dark nebula is the only place in the galaxy you'd see a dark screen. Very good. Give me just a second, Tom, sorry.
I just want to tell you that the package is into this other renter. On the front step here, if he comes by, if somebody take a package off the front step, don't worry about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Slight diversion, I apologize. Okay. Inside a dark nebula is the only place in the galaxy you'd see a dark screen. Very good. Zaphod laughed. He was clearly very excited about something, almost childishly so. Hey, this is really terrific. This is just far too much. What's so great about being stuck in a dust cloud? Said Ford. What would you reckon to find here? Urged Zaphod. Nothing. No stars? No planets? No. Computer, shouted Zaphod. Rotate angle of vision through 180 degrees and don't talk about it. For a moment it seemed that nothing was happening, then a brightness glowed at the edge of the huge screen. A red star the size of a small plate crept across it, followed quickly by another one, a binary system. Then a vast crescent sliced into the corner of the picture, a red glare shading away into deep black, the night side of the planet. I found it, cried Zaphod, thumping the console. I found it. Ford stared at it in astonishment. What is it? He asked. That, said Zaphod, is the most improbable planet that ever existed. Okay. Chapter 15. Excerpt from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, page 634,784, section 5A. Entry, Magrathea. Far back in the mists of ancient time, in the great and glorious days of the former galactic empire, life was wild, rich, and largely tax-free. Mighty starships plied their way between exotic suns, seeking adventure and reward amongst the farthest reaches of galactic space. In those days, spirits were brave, stakes were high, men were real men, women were real men, and small furry creatures from Alpha Centauri were real small creatures from Alpha Centauri. And all dared to brave unknown terrors, to do mighty deeds, to boldly split infinitives that no man had split before, and thus was the empire forged. Many men, of course, became extremely rich, but this was perfectly natural and nothing to be ashamed of, because no one was really poor, or at least no one worth speaking of. And for all of the richest and most successful merchants, life inevitably became rather dull and niggly. They began to imagine that this was therefore the fault of the worlds they'd settled on. None of them was entirely satisfactory. Either the climate wasn't quite right in the later part of the afternoon, or the day was a half an hour too long, or the sea was exactly the wrong shade of pink. And thus were created the conditions for a staggering new form of specialist industry, custom-made luxury planet building. The home of this industry was the planet Magrathea, where hyperspatial engineers sucked matter through white holes in space to form it into dream planets. Gold planets, platinum planets, soft rubber planets with lots of earthquakes, all lovingly made to meet exacting standards that the galaxy's richest men naturally had come to expect. But so successful was this venture that Magrathea itself soon became the richest planet of all time. The rest of the galaxy was reduced to abject poverty. And so the system broke down, the empire collapsed, and a long, sullen silence settled over 1 billion hungry worlds, disturbed only by the pen scratching of scholars as they labored into the night over their smug little treatises on the value of a planned political economy. Magrathea itself disappeared, and its memories soon passed into the obscurity of legend. In these enlightened days, of course, no one believes a word of it. We have time for one more. Chapter 16. Arthur awoke to the sound of argument and went to the bridge. Ford was waving his arms about. You're crazy, Zaphod, he was saying. Magrathea is a myth, a fairy story. It's what parents tell their kids about at night if they want them to grow up to become economists. It's what we're currently in orbit about, insisted Zaphod. Look, I can't help what you may be personally in orbit about, said Ford. But this ship. Computer! Shouted Zaphod. Oh no. Hi there, this is Eddie, your shipboard computer. And I'm feeling just great, guys. And I know I'm going to get a bundle of kicks out of any program you care to run through me. Arthur looked inquiringly at Trillian. She motioned him to come on in, but keep quiet. Computer, said Zaphod, tell us what our present trajectory is. A real pleasure, fella, it burbled. We are currently in orbit at an altitude of 300 miles around the legendary planet of Magrathea. Proving nothing, said Ford. I wouldn't trust that computer to speak my weight. I can do that for you, sure, enthused the computer, punching out more ticker tape. I can even work out your personality problems to 10 decimal places if it will help. Trillian interrupted. Zaphod, she said, any minute now we will be swinging around to the daylight side of this planet, adding whatever it turns out to be. Hey, what do you mean by that? This planet's where I predicted it would be, isn't it? Yes, I know there's a planet there. I'm not arguing with anyone. It's just I wouldn't know Magrathea from any other lump of cold rock. Dawn's coming up if you want it. Okay, muttered Zaphod. Let's at least give our eyes a good time. Computer? Hi there, what can I? Just shut up and give us a view of the planet again. A dark, featureless mass once more filled the screens, the planet rolling away beneath them. They watched for a moment in silence, but Zaphod was fidgety with excitement. We are now traversing the night side, he said in a hushed voice. The planet rolled on. The surface of the planet is now 300 miles beneath us, he continued. He was trying to restore a sense of occasion to what he felt should have been a great moment. Magrathea! He was piqued by Ford's skeptical reaction. Magrathea! In a few seconds, he continued, we should see there. The moment carried itself. Even the most seasoned star tramp can't help but shiver at the spectacular drama of a sunrise seen from space. But a binary sunrise is one of the marvels of the galaxy. Out of the utter blackness stabbed a sudden point of blinding light. It crept up by slight degrees and spread sideways in a thin crescent blade. Within seconds, 2 suns were visible, furnaces of light, searing the black edge of the horizon with white fire. Fierce shafts of color streaked through the thin atmosphere beneath them. Oh, the fires of dawn, breathed Zaphod. The twin suns of Solianius and Ram, or whatever, said Ford quietly. Solianus and Ram, insisted Zaphod. The suns blazed into a pitch of space, and a low ghostly music floated through the bridge. Marvin was humming ironically because he hated humans so much. As Ford gazed at the spectacle of light before them, excitement burned inside him, but only the excitement of seeing a strange new planet. It was enough for him to see it as it was. It faintly irritated him that Zaphod had to impose some ludicrous fantasy onto the scene to make it work for him. All this Magrathea nonsense seemed juvenile. Isn't it enough to see that the garden is beautiful without having to believe that there are fairies at the bottom of it too? All this Magrathea business seemed totally incomprehensible to Arthur. He edged up to Trillian and asked her what's going on. I only know what Zaphod's told me, she whispered. Apparently, Magrathea is some kind of legend from way back, which no one seriously believes in. A bit like Atlantis on Earth, except that the legends say that the Magratheans used to manufacture planets. Arthur blinked at the screens and felt he was missing something important. Suddenly, he realized what it was. Is there any tea on this spaceship? He asked. More of the planet was unfolding beneath them as the heart of gold streaked across its orbital path. The suns now stood high in the black sky. The pyrotechnics of dawn were over. The surface of the planet appeared bleak and forbidding in the common light of day. Gray, dusty, and only dimly contoured. It looked dead and cold as a crypt. From time to time, promising features would appear on the distant horizon. Ravines, maybe mountains, maybe even cities. But as they approached, the lines would soften and blur into anonymity, and nothing would transpire. The planet's surface was blurred with time by the slow movement of the thin, stagnant air that had crept across it for century upon century. Clearly, it was very, very old. A moment of doubt came to Ford as he watched the gray landscape move beneath them. The immensity of time worried him. He could feel it as a presence. He cleared his throat. Well, even supposing if it is, said Zaphod. Which it isn't, continued Ford. What do you want with it anyway? There's nothing here. Not on the surface, said Zaphod. Right, just supposing there's something. I take it you're not here for the sheer industrial archaeology of it all. What are you after? One of Zaphod's heads looked away. The other one looked around to see what the first was looking at, but it wasn't looking at anything much. Well, said Zaphod airily, it's partly the curiosity, partly the sense of adventure. I mostly think it's the fame and money. Ford glanced at him sharply. He got a very strong impression that Zaphod hadn't the faintest idea why he was there at all. You know, I don't like the look of that planet at all, said Trillian, shivering. Take no notice, said Zaphod. With half the wealth of the former Galactic Empire stored on it somewhere, it can afford to look frumpy. Bullshit, thought Ford. Even supposing this was the home of some ancient civilization now gone to dust, even supposing a number of exceedingly unlikely things, there was no way that the vast treasures of wealth were going to be stored there in any form that would still have meaning now. He shrugged. I think it's just a dead planet, he said. The suspense is killing me, said Arthur testily. Stress and nervous tension are now serious social problems in all parts of the galaxy. And it is in order that this situation not be in any way exacerbated that the following facts will now be revealed in advance. The planet in question is, in fact, the legendary Magrathea. The deadly missile attack shortly to be launched by an ancient automatic defense system will merely result in the breakage of 3 coffee cups and a mouse cage, the bruising of somebody's upper arm, and the untimely creation and sudden demise of a bowl of petunias and an innocent sperm whale. In order that some sense of mystery should still be preserved, no revelation will yet be made concerning whose upper arm sustains the bruise. This fact may safely be made the subject of suspense, since it is of no significance whatsoever. Yeah.